Why don't you give us the story of uranium and why you think, even though it appears to have gone a long way, you think it's got a lot more to go?
This isn't even first innings. They're still, doing batting practice over here. This will be the greatest speculative insanity bubble, I think, of my professional career. Look, uranium, people have been talking about this for 5 years. I'm kind of sick of hearing about it, quite honestly. And they were just wrong. There's a small little supply deficit, and there's plenty of uranium above ground. And what really changed is in 2019, Cameco put McArthur River on care and maintenance, and that started really working down the above ground. Kazatomprom did a bit of care and maintenance. A few mines went out of production because it's not much fun to produce uranium and sell it at 25 when your cost is 50 to 60. And so we're in a world now where the world produces, let's call it 125. There's about 25 of secondary supplies. Let's call it like 150-ish. And the world needs 180 going on over 200 by the end of this decade. So you're working down 30 million pounds a year, 3 million every month. And that's starting to be a big number. And this has been going on for a bit. Let's say the world's worked down 100 million pounds since these mines went on care and maintenance. Between that and some of the junior miners decided that mining sucks and they bought uranium instead. There's an entity called Yellowcake in the UK that keeps buying uranium. And then there's this entity called Uranium Participation that also kept buying uranium. So let's just call it 100 million pounds disappeared into the ether. What's changed now is that Sprott took over Uranium Participation. They renamed it Sprott Trust, which is hilariously called Sput, as in like Sputnik, because that's where this is going, outer space. And they launched an ATM, and they started buying up all the uranium. And you guys know how an ATM...
1 second. I'm gonna interrupt there. Tell people, for those who aren't familiar, what an ATM is.
So an ATM, basically, it's kind of like a buyback, but in reverse. Yeah. All day long, yeah.
It stands for at the market. Is that correct?
It stands for many things, but let's use at the market.
It's in essence an issue that it can be done in the open market.
Right. And so every day this entity issues shares, and it uses the cash raised by issuing shares to buy more uranium. It's a very simple, calculation. If it trades above NAV, this thing will issue as many shares as it possibly can, and it will buy uranium. And so, in the 3 weeks since they launched this thing, it bought over 6 million pounds of uranium. It was a $300 million ATM, and it's used about 250 million of that. And it's just going out there buying uranium. Remember what I said, there's not much uranium left because about 100 million of it's been used. You talk to people who are real smart, and I use that, that in quotes. But the general view is maybe as low as 5 and as many as 25 million pounds that can be basically bought. That's left, in warehouses globally. It's not spoken for either, at Yellowcake or at Sprott or, at junior mining companies. So that's let's call it the mobile physical supply that could be basically bought. And a lot of these power plants had been thinking they were going to buy that at 25 and use it in their reactors. And so Sprott went out and bought 6 of this. And then today they announced that they added $1 billion to their ATM. I mean, a lot of people have been talking about this on Twitter. Oh, that's a one and done. And I think a lot of the utilities had also thought, like, okay, 300 million pounds, like we've seen this before. Hilariously, one of the large U.S. utilities actually called up investor relations at Sprott to ask what an ATM was. I mean, that's how clueless these guys are.
Right.
And so anyway, $1 billion. Let's say that they buy this at 50. That's 20 million more pounds. Effectively, we're going to have a run on uranium. I think it's almost inevitable. And I think this is going to look a lot like GameStonk. But the difference with GameStonk, and I mean, let's talk about Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, because, I came on your show about a year ago and, Kevin, you rolled your eyes back then about it. But look, you had this entity and it had the same thing. It issued shares and bought Bitcoins. And Bitcoins are worthless, okay? Like I totally knew it at the time. I know it now. But if you have an entity that is going to go out there and buy a few hundred of these a day, and then a few thousand, then 1,000, then a few thousand a day, eventually it's going to corner the free float and force the price higher. And so, I bought a ton of this Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. And it was a multi-bagger for me. But the thing about Bitcoins, and eventually guys who own Bitcoins, eventually they're going to sell it because despite what they talk about, how it's going to be a Bitcoin economy, really people buy Bitcoins in dollars because they want to get dollars back because you can't really use Bitcoins for anything. So these guys, anyone who owns a Bitcoin eventually is going to be a seller of a Bitcoin. And so, it was like a 5-bagger for Bitcoin, and then it ran to a wall of sellers and the momentum died. This is very different. Anyone who owns uranium today, they own uranium because they have a power plant that needs uranium. And so as time goes on, they're going to use their existing uranium. They have to buy more. Effectively, let's say that they're short uranium, because if you don't have enough uranium for your personal needs, then you got to go into the market every couple of months and buy more. So all these guys are effectively short uranium. It's very different from the Bitcoin where they go take profits. Here, as the price goes up, they still have to buy more. And so you basically see this in sort of insanity squeeze. It's kind of like how with GameStop, at $5, Melvin was just kind of like, he was chilling. At $10, he didn't really care. At 20, risk kind of tapped him out in the shoulder. And at 100, he had to start covering. And I think the same thing happening here. At a higher price, suddenly the utility is going to panic, and they're going to basically go fight Sprott for the physical pounds. And Sprott, Sprott doesn't care what the price is. Sprott, if they, sell X number of dollars, they have to buy X number of pounds that day. It's that simple. They're totally price agnostic. As long as you have fuckwits that are buying this thing, they have to buy uranium. And look, right now, I bought mine roughly when physical was 31. So, it'd been in a range for like 5, 6, 7 years let's call it between 25 and 35. I bought the breakout, when it just poked its head above 30. And I said, okay, this is waking up. So, I felt like I was risking $5 maybe. I think when this gets over 100, it starts getting in the news. That's when the Reddit boys really notice it, and they just come powering through. And remember, these utilities, you do the math on it, they're short somewhere between 500 million and £1 billion by the end of this decade, because that's what the deficit will be over this time. And, they need to rebuild their inventories as well. So you just have this insanity squeeze where, you have this $10 billion piece of equipment that's really, really kind of worthless, I guess, is the word you'd use if you don't have uranium. And uranium as a percentage of the cost is really negligible. So you have this buyer that will effectively get into a bidding war against all the other power plants and get into a bidding war against Sprott. And I like bidding wars. Anyway, I own a lot.